Hi, I'm Keely Glitters and we're here today at my tattoo studio Valentine's in Leamington Spa. Today I'm going to show you how I make a traditional glittery colour tattoo. Let's go! I'm just going to run through with you what I've got on my workstation. I'll be using a Bishop wand packer, which is a 4.2 stroke. My cartridges I'll be using are Stella 2.0. I'll be using a 7 round liner, an 11 round shader, a 14 round shader and a 7 mag. I also use a disposable wand grip, which is by Bishop as well. I've got some A&D, which I'll use to rub onto the skin, my Sharpie for the stencil, some ink caps and some water. That's everything, and now we're going to get onto the stencil. First step is putting the stencil on. So I give the skin a nice little clean. I always make sure that my customers take their shoes off as well, just so that they're nice and level and as natural as possible. And give the leg a little shave. I then normally dry it off with a little bit of alcohol, just to make sure that it's nice and oil-free. Then I mark where my stencil is going to go. Apply some Stencil stuff. And there you go. I'm just going to wait for the stencil to dry for 5–10 minutes and then crack on with the tattoo. I normally start by running my machine at about 6.5. And I start at the top of my tattoo, or I start at the top of my stencil, sorry. Just so that I'm not leaning across it. And start with a little line first. I always hang my needle out quite a bit, just so you can see it, so you can see where it's going. Yeah, I was always taught to have the needle hanging out just so you can fully see exactly where it's going rather than running the tube. I always start with my 11 round shader to do my bold lines first. I think just because there's more of the bold lines, so it's always better to get those on there first, just so I don't rub anything else out. I've always been into more of a traditional style of tattooing, which is I think why I like to use a bold line, especially for my style. I feel like it gives it more of a stronger look. I don't think it would work with thin lines. I used to use a 14 round shader, but I think it's just a little bit too thick. But again, it all depends on what part of the body I'd be tattooing. But yeah, mostly I would use, for this kind of size tattoo, I would always go for an 11 round shader. I think anything too big in time, it would not heal so well, not age so well. So yeah, this thickness I think is a good size. I always make sure my tissue's dry when I'm lining, just I don't want to take that stencil off, make it too wet. When I'm doing a circle, I generally try and feather it in first, rather than just going straight in with a big bold line. My client is a little bit twitchy, which is perfectly normal. I just find you generally just kind of lift off when that happens. You kind of just go with the movement as much as you can. I always like to pull the lines towards myself. This way you can really see what you're doing, rather than if you was to push it the other way. I'm using dynamic black, a really nice consistency, always heals well, flows well out of the machine as well. For these smaller sections, I'm just going to colour them in with my shader. I just do really tight, little tiny circles. I'm just going to change needles for a minute because I want to do these little eyes before I end up rubbing them out. I'm going to use my 7 round liner for those, just because they're a little bit smaller. The cartridges I use are Stella 2.0. I use them because I find the ink consistency is really nice. For the ink consistency, yeah, the flow's nice so that it's not either getting stuck up into the cartridge or not just blobbing out everywhere. It comes out nice and smoothly when you're lining. Always make sure with your lining that it kind of glides in rather than sticking it straight in, just so that you get a nice smooth start to finish. You don't want the needle to get stuck, creating like an ink blob. I use both hands when I'm tattooing for stretching. I push away with the one I'm lining with and then push apart with my other hand, just so it gives it that nice taut tension on the skin. The lens is a bit twitchy there, so I just kind of lift off. I don't want to end up getting my needle stuck. With these long lines, I'm just going to feather them in a little bit more rather than pulling it super straight to start with. And then I'll go over it just where it's quite long. I don't want to run out of movement with my hands, whereas the smaller ones I can stretch it enough to be able to pull it in one fluid movement. I'm going to change needles again to my 7 mag. I always use a curved mag and normally a 7, just because I like being able to get into the smaller areas where it's a smaller needle grouping, and for the curved it's less traumatic on the skin than if it was just a regular mag. And I'll just do little tiny circles, give it a little wipe, make sure it's all in there. And then just feather back round if there's any little gaps that I've missed. Just do a little bit of black in the corners with my mag. I'll give it another clean because I need to do my red lines now. And then that's all the lines done. I always try and get the black in before finishing the lines if they're in colour. And this way it doesn't contaminate and make the coloured lines dirty. It's always good to work dark to light. That's all the lines done. I'm just going to give it a little clean. Make sure those red lines are all nice and solid. And then it's normally a good time to have a little break once you've done your lines. Get your colours out. Now I'm going to go into the next stage, which will be my darker glittery dots. I normally start with the teal, Tahitian teal, which is the darker of the three. Whenever I do glittery dots, I always use 3 tones and then the white. I think it just gives it that more glittery kind of feel. So I'm going to use my 7 round liner now, and I'm actually going to use a different colour than I just said. I'm going to use Eternal Plum, which is probably my darkest colour, and I'm going to start with my little dots in the snail's shells. I'm still running it at 6.5, and I've got a wet tissue now, just so that I can wipe away any of the excess ink on my little dots. As I say, I always use 3 colours when I'm doing my glitter. So for their shells, I'm going to be using plum, pumpkin spice and autumn orange. And then I'll do the little white dots at the end. So yeah, 3 colours and a white. I use a mixture of Fusion and Eternal inks. I think I just like the way that, yeah, the pigments are. They've just got nice rich colours, nice and bold. These tones all go nicely together. Tried lots of different brands over the years, but always end up going back to Eternal and Fusion. Definitely been my favourites. Just give that a little clean. I'm going to go back to using my 11 round shader now and start on my turquoise dots. I'm going to be doing those on the snails. I'm going to start with this one at the bottom. I always start with the darker tone. Don't press too hard, just enough for it to penetrate the skin. You don't want to leave the needle in too long so that it ends up blowing. If you do them light, you can always go back in and darken them up or thicken them up. I'm going to use a darker purple now, just on the other sides of the snails, just so they're going to have 2 different colours of glitter in them, just so they look a little bit more shiny and snail-like. I want to do a little coloured line around this edge here, but I'm going to do that in a light teal, so I'll leave a gap for that. I always like to clean down between each colour, just so it doesn't get too messy, and just so you can make sure that everything's in there nicely. I'm going to do my mid-tone dots now, which will be Tahitian teal. You can see that's building up the effect already, just by using 2 different tones. I've just noticed that I've wiped my little snail trail off, so I'm just going to dot that back in, just so I know roughly where it's going to go. I'm going to change needles now to my 14 round shader, and I'm going to do my red dots in here. I just want them to be a little tiny bit bigger, just because there's a bit more space really. I always start on the outside edge. I tend to do them a little bit thicker, like more close together around the edge, and kind of they get a bit thinner gap-wise as they go in, just so it gives it a little bit more of a kind of a framed shape. And again, I try and keep the machine nice and straight and don't hold it down for too long. You don't want too much ink to go in the skin in any one place. And then the same again on this side, just do them a bit closer together, this edge. And then they'll get a bit thinner as they go in. I'm going to do my darker of my two pinks now with the red. Just put them in the little gaps, and again leaving a little bit more space as I work inwards. I'm going to go back to using my purple now. I want to do purple glitter in these too. So I don't always work dark to light. Sometimes I jump about a bit. Just have to be careful. I'm going to put the middle pink that I used in this one, I'm going to put that in these, just because I've got purple and teal here, so then it'll pull the pink out a little bit. I'm going to use my cool mint now. I'm going to line around this edge with it first and get kicked by Lindsay. I'm going to use that colour as well to dot in these. I've gone back to my 11 round shader for this part. Just give that a little wipe, make sure that I'm happy with the amount of dots. And always make sure that I've left enough room to get the white dots in as well. I'm going to go back to using my 7 liner now, just to do the smaller dots in the shells before I finish the bigger dots and then go on to colour packing. And start again with the mid-tone next to the darker plum. This is autumn orange. My advice I'd give to an apprentice, I think it would be to really sit down and draw without an iPad. I think when we have iPads now, it can be almost makes it so easy. I think my advice would be to try all different mediums, pencil, acrylics, like anything that you can experiment with, rather than just using an iPad straight away. Yeah, iPads are amazing. Like I wouldn't know what to do without mine, but I do think just to broaden your skill set, just to being able to draw on paper. If your iPad broke, just having that ability to have use different techniques, I think is really, really valuable. This is my lighter tone, pumpkin spice, and the same, that'll be the 3 colours I use, and then leave a bit of room for the white. The little white dots will go in between. Going back to my 14 now, I'm just going to do one more colour of dots in the little bits of tape. I'm going to start colouring the backgrounds now. I'm going to do them with my lighter pink. I'm going to turn my machine up just a tiny little bit because I'll be doing quite fast little circles. I've got it running at 6.7. I'm just working small little circles, wiping it as I go, just to make sure that it's nice and solid. If there's any little gaps, you can just go back in with the corner and just skim over it. It's always quite good to just do it in one pass, just so you don't cause too much trauma on the skin. If you do need to go back in at a second pass, it's good to go at a different direction, just so that you're kind of cross-hatching the colour. With social media, I think if there's things you want to tattoo, my advice that somebody told me once, he said, if you draw stuff, people will want it. Like, you just got to keep pushing it out there. The more you do it, the more people will believe in you and see what you're doing and want to be a part of it. So I just think, yeah, just be true to yourself and keep drawing what you love. And then people, hopefully, will want to wear it. Just do the little dots and the little gaps that I've left from putting the colour in. Give them a little shiny shell. I think always be aware of the distance between your dots when you're doing them, just so that you don't end up with nowhere to put your white at the end if they were too close together. The same with if they're too far apart and it doesn't create that glittery illusion. At least if they're too far apart, though, you can always add another tone, bring them a bit closer together. That's all the little dots done. I'm going to use the 14 around the outside for the rest of the white dots there, and then I'll go back to an 11 for the snails. And just give that a little clean, make sure I'm happy with all those white dots. And then for my last dots in the snails, I've gone back to a fresh 11 round shader. And the same as with the colour dots, just don't hang around too long, just enough for it to hit the skin, get the colour in there, and you can move on to the next dot. And just make sure that they're in those little gaps that you've left, so that it makes it quite dense, just all full of dots, and makes them look shiny. I couldn't imagine doing tattoos that don't make me smile. That's the tattoo finished. Now we'll move on to aftercare. First step, I just give it a little wipe just to make sure there's nothing on it that can get trapped underneath the dry lock pads. And just make sure they're nice and stuck down. And that's the tutorial finished. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow me, my Instagram is @Keely Glitters. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to Killer Ink's YouTube channel. Thank you.